Okay, good evening, everybody. Are we ready to go? Yeah. Okay. Right, evening, everybody. Welcome to the Oxford City Planning Committee meeting on the 23rd of June. Since we have quite a lot of members of the public in today, I thought I would just start by explaining who is who here and how the meeting runs. So we have 4 planning officers here. There are professional planning officers who prepare the reports and are also here to answer questions. We have 1 legal professional here who's also an expert in planning law if we have planning law questions. And then we have 11 elected councillors who will all get to vote on the applications before us today and also to ask questions about them. There is space in the meeting after. We have a presentation, first of all, by officers. Then there is time for speakers, and we do have speakers both against and for the first item. You will have 5 minutes each, and after that time, I will probably ask you to go back to your seats. Because from that point onwards, it's up for councillors can ask questions. It may be that they want to ask a question that is best answered by one of the speakers, in which case we'll ask the speakers to come back to the table and answer that question. But then we have a period of questions, then we move into comments and discussion, and then we vote on it. Right, so that's how the meeting works. First item on the agenda then is, do we have any apologies? And I believe we do. We have Councillor Railton and Councillor Fry is substituting, and Councillor Taylor and Councillor Elphinston is substituting. Thank you both very much. Then I have to ask, are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Henwood.
Thank you, Chair. So my group made a recommendation to the Oxford concerning Burton Park. I would like to reassure the public and the committee that I come to this session or this item with an open mind. No due objection.
Thank you. I might just check that with our legal if they've had a. So you've made a recommendation for the. No,
it's my group that's made the recommendation, not myself. But I think I should declare that interest.
Okay. That's okay. All right, great. Thank you. Councillor Koresh.
I want to declare interesting about the application of the Oxford Science Park. I'm the Oxford City Council for Littlemore, but I haven't discussed anything with this plan application, and I have an open mind to make the decision. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, and Councillor Elphinston.
I wish to be recused from item 5 because as former county councillor for Rosalind Littlemore, I had comments on the proposals. So just to make sure that it's not being predetermined, I want to make sure that I can be excused. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
I also wanted to declare that regarding item 5, which is the one in Littlemore, right? I've made comments concerning the Ellison Institute of Technology, but not regarding this specific application, and I will approach this with an open mind and as objectively.
Thank you very much. Then the next item is to look at the minutes from the last meeting of the Planning Committee. I won't go through them page by page, so please, if anybody has any anything to point out, any omissions, errors in them, now is your chance. Okay, I'm taking that as we're agreed those are right. Thank you. So we then move on to item 4, which is the application for the Bertie Place Recreation Ground and Land southwest of Whiteham Street, Oxford. And I'm going to hand over to Tracy Harvey to present this to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just start the slideshow. So since the preparation of the report, we have received further representations on the application, written submissions in the form of posters and a survey have been received from Save Bertie, which is the local campaign group. These have been circulated by email to councillors on the planning committee, are available on the council's website and are on display in the town hall this evening. In respect of the report, there is a spelling error. So unfortunately, spell checker replaced Bertie with Bertis in a couple of places. So apologies on behalf of spell checker. Condition 17 is proposed to be amended to exclude the reference to statutory, as the condition refers to statutory biodiversity net gain. And as set out within the report, the statutory element doesn't apply as the application was submitted before the regulations came into play. So all we need to do there with the committee's permission is, if you decide to go with approval, then we just need to omit word statutory from that condition. In respect of paragraph 3.2 of the report, this relates to the heads of terms of the legal agreement relating to the provision of affordable housing. The applicant has requested that the staircasing says that the minimum share is 10%, which can be staircased to 100% home ownership. Thank you, Chair. So turning to the scheme itself, the proposal is a full planning application for the erection of 31 affordable homes on Bertie Place recreation ground and associated land, together with public open space, a replacement multi-use games area, and that's shortened in the report to MUGA, a children's play area, works to the accesses and landscaping. The proposed housing mix is 11 one-bedroom flats, 1 two-bedroom flat, 9 two-bedroom houses, 10 three-bedroom houses. The primary planning consideration is that the site is allocated for housing development under policy SP 32 of the adopted Oxford Local Plan 2036. The site, and that's the application site marked in red on this plan, covers 2 areas. Site A, the existing Bertie Place recreation ground, known as Bertie Park, which includes the current play area and MUGA. And then Site B, which is adjoining land to the west of Site A, which is currently largely semi-natural open space. Sites A and B are separated by a watercourse known as Redbridge Stream. Access to the site would be from the existing Bertie Place into the site with a new street layout. Existing pedestrian and cycle links to the north and east would be retained. The scheme is proposed as car-free, except for a single car club space near to the existing entrance from Bertie Place. The design of the homes will be a mixture of 2-story flats and houses. And I'll just run through the house types. The houses will be mainly red brick with tiled roofs. As you'll see from these plans, the scheme includes solar panels on the properties. And in addition to those, there will be air source heat pumps. So one of the major issues in the application is the loss of part of the existing recreation ground and whether the replacement and enhancement measures are sufficient. The proposals as shown on this drawing include a replacement multi-use games area in this location, a replacement children's play area, again, both on site A, as well as changes to land levels on site A in this vicinity to provide flood compensatory water storage. A wildlife buffer zone along the edges of Redbridge Stream, which runs through the site here, is proposed. And further to this, the designation of Site B as publicly accessible open space with a new pedestrian access route and habitat management. So to access Site B, a new footbridge is proposed, which is shown with red hatching in this area. So this dog legs around the site boundary. So this is the proposed profiles of the new bridge. And you can see dotted in blue the existing land levels. So the bridge starts at the existing levels, then inclines slightly, and you'll see that at the same time, the land falls away to the height of the existing Redbridge Stream and the water level here. As set out in the report, the main planning considerations are the local plan site allocation, the lack of a 5-year housing supply within the city, the delivery of much needed affordable housing, the loss and replacement of open space and recreation facilities, highways access and movement, flood risk, drainage and land contamination, impact on trees and landscaping, design and layout quality, community safety, and the impact on local amenity and character. Consideration has been given within the report to comments received from statutory and technical consultees. These have resulted in scheme revisions during the course of the application process. The report sets out a summary of the significant local objections, including those from the Save Bertie campaign group. The main concerns coming through the objections are the loss of valued green space, impact on recreation facilities, harm to local character, and impact on neighbouring residents and community amenity. The officer recommendation is that on balance, the lack of a 5-year housing land supply, the site allocation in the local plan, the benefits of delivering the allocated housing site and affordable homes outweigh the identified harms. The scheme is considered to be in broad compliance with the adopted local plan policy and national planning policy framework. The recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the completion of a legal agreement to secure 22 social rented homes, 9 shared ownership 2-bedroom homes, planning conditions, and finally, the committee is requested for delegated authority to be given to officers to finalise the legal agreement and conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Okay, we now have time for speakers. We've got 5 minutes for speakers again. So I've got Councillor Muddiman and Caddy Beck. If you'd like to come up to the desk. Okay. Would you like me to let you know when 2.5 minutes has gone so you can split it, or? Great. Okay, I'll let you know when 4 has gone. Thanks.
Okay, local plan policy G5 and NPPF 104 state that recreational facilities should not be lost unless the loss would be replaced by equivalent or better provision in terms of quantity and quality in a suitable location. On face value, policy SP32 complies with this because it states that planning permission will only be granted if the existing Bertie Place recreation ground, including a replacement mugger, is re-provided on land in Plot B. This was evidently not deliverable even when you submitted the 2036 plan for inspection. The bridge rises up 1.7 metres away from land level, 5 metres away from properties in Whiten Street, who will be adversely impacted by increased overlooking, noise and disturbance. This leads to a 250-metre mown grass footpath, not accessible for wheelchairs or safe for unaccompanied kids. The maintenance regime is unchanged. You've previously insisted this will provide great benefit to the local community. The police disagree. Our community survey disagrees. Even the officer's report gives limited weight to the provision of open space on Site B. The site policy plan for the 2045 local plan doesn't mention Site B or the bridge. On Site A, a fenced wildlife buffer zone exists beside the play area and mugger and behind Whiteham Street. Based on stated dimensions, the recreation space on Site A now represents less than 11% of the existing Bertie Park. You don't require new recreation facilities to be equivalent or meet the needs of existing users. The only conditions are provision of some playground equipment for children up to 12 and measures for the mugger to be secured from dawn till dusk. Really? The officer's report, paragraph 11.33, states that the development overall satisfies the aims and objectives of SP32. That is completely wrong if the recreational space is going to shrink by 89%. Although loss of recreation space is given substantial weight in the planning balance, the officer's report insists social housing is the primary consideration. We welcome social housing, but one of the overarching objectives of the NPPF is not just to provide housing, but open spaces that reflect current and future needs and support communities' health, social and cultural well-being. This is the existing catchment area for Bertie Park, and there's potential for new housing right across the area. We don't object to 230 homes at the Redbridge Paddock, but to the decimation of recreation facilities at a time when there's a mental health crisis for young people in Oxfordshire. This scheme is to be weighed against adverse impacts on our community, which in this case are very significant. In my opinion, the tilted balance is not engaged because the adverse effects significantly and demonstrably outweigh benefits. I have a final question for officers. You require a flood escape plan for vulnerable residents, including alternative refuge arrangements where necessary. Flood events can last for days. Given the frequency of flood warnings, what level of warning would trigger evacuation, and
4
who would
minutes.
bear the ongoing costs of refuge arrangements?
We desperately need more housing in Oxford, and Bertie Park is an allocated site, but this plan is deeply flawed. TVP have objected due to the proximity of the mugger to homes, effectively designing in future neighbour disputes, And the mitigation offered is to lower the site by 30 centimetres is just insufficient. They also say there are safety concerns on site B with no natural surveillance and only one access point. And they also say that on lighting, it's not possible to safely light the street and keep the Mugger unlit at the same time. Those two things just can't coexist. On flooding, the site is split across zones 1 to 3. There are 5 flood risk vulnerability categories, and the residential component is in the more vulnerable category, while site B is in the water compatible. Planning policy guidance relating to flood risk vulnerability and flood zone compatibility.
Sorry, can you wind up?
I've got but 3
Go.
more sentences. With your discretion, Chair, emphasises where developments contain different elements of vulnerability, as this one does, the highest vulnerability category should be used unless the development is considered in component parts, which this one isn't. So the whole site should be considered as more vulnerable, and that means an exception
You're going
test
to have
is
to
required.
stop there. Sorry. Thank you very much.
May I have 1 more minute to finish? If you
No,
give the other
sorry, we've
side
gone
1
well
more
over
minute
5
too.
now. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you both very much. Any conversation, things were covered very thoroughly in the officers' report, who have reported, who have covered the objectors' points in good detail in the report. Thank you. So we now have some speakers for Dave Scholes, Stuart Moran, Julian Bailey, Georgie Thompson.
It's just myself.
Thank you. You also have 5 minutes and a few seconds over, as the other side had a few seconds over. Thanks. And if you could just introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, members, and also I'd like to thank Tracy, the planning officer, who's produced such a detailed, thorough report and has covered many of the key issues, and I would say must give comfort to the opponents this evening. My name is Stuart Moran. I'm the Senior Development Officer at OX Place, which is the company set up by Oxford City Council to deliver more social housing in the city. And I thank you for the time you've given me this evening for this application. Tonight, you heard from the residents who absolutely love Bertie Park. They're very passionate about their community, and that certainly did come through. But I want to ask people this evening at this meeting who are not in the room tonight, because they cannot be, and those are the people that require housing in the city. The housing waiting list in the city itself for affordable housing is not just a policy phrase, but it's the difference between staying in the city and being pushed out. And affordable housing in the city of Oxford is key and very important, as Tracy touched upon. Oxford is one of the most expensive cities in England, and the gap between working people and what they earn and what housing costs are is not just a statistic in Oxford, it is real. Key workers, young families, people who grow up in the city who want to remain part of it, close to their family, close to their parents, their work, are being forced out because there is not enough housing that's genuinely affordable. And OX Place, working with the City Council, are attempting to deliver those much needed affordable homes. The Oxford Authority monitoring report shows that there is less than 3 years of housing supply, which is a long way short of what is required. The application that we're proposing is to deliver 31 new homes. 22 are for social rent, which is real affordability. And that's the most secure form of tenure that could exist for families who need it most. 9 are shared ownership, and for those people who are taking their first step onto the housing ladder. So the scheme is 100% affordable, allocated as touched upon in the local plan. And it will provide 31 families secure and sustainable housing, much needed for young people. We talk about young people and how young people's futures are determined by their housing, and this is key. It determines so much in terms of their housing, their education, their social welfare, and this is certainly going a long way to address it. I want to address some of the concerns though. We recognise that there is a loss of open space through this planning application, but we are bettering what's being currently provided. We're enhancing Site B. Currently, residents are locked out of Site B, and it's long been neglected and overgrown space. We're proposing a new, accessible, safer footbridge with a nature trail on Site B, which will be accessible for people in pushchairs and wheelchairs, because there'll be a very simple trail that allow that to happen. Unlike the current not fit for purpose bridge, where you cannot get across in a pushchair or a wheelchair, the new bridge will address that. There will be a new multi-use games area and a new children's play area. Again, residents will be involved in the input of the facilities that goes into those areas, and we've already had consultations to address what they would like. We are replacing ageing facilities, so there is a betterment and what the new equipment is providing. And we also would like to say that the scheme itself provides biodiversity net gain.
You've got 1 minute
Yeah,
left.
38 new trees and a car-free development, and linking into the national cycle network. On the flood risk assessment, we have taken measures to mitigate the risk of flooding. We've worked very closely with the Environmental Agency to remove their objections, and they have been satisfied with the bridge and the buffer zone, which we have explained within our application. I want to address the concerns about Thames Valley Police. These have been taken seriously and do reflect the design amendments that we've made and the agreed proposed conditions such as secure by design accreditation. And finally, to suggest that the site could deliver this other housing, i.e. Redbridge. Again, this site is in addition to that. You know, that site provides 200 new homes. This provides 31 additional affordable homes. So it is a much needed scheme.
Wind up.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Right, so we then move on to questions. Councillor Fairweather.
I have a number of questions. Would you like them all at once or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Item 3.2 in the officer's report. Could you explain this curious phrase staircasing? It's the first time I've come across that. Secondly, section 5.1 talks, the last bit of the paragraph says, requesting reverting the scheme to a local plan policy compliant provision. Could you outline what that actually means in terms of words that councillors might understand? 10.3, which is 10.30, which is the Thames Valley Police list of objections. I'd like to ask whether you consider that all of their objections have actually been addressed. And finally, a general question about air source heat pumps. Are these actually, given the current climate conditions, are these actually reversible air source heat pumps? That's it.
Thank you, Chair. Turning to the first question on staircasing in paragraph 3.2. So staircasing is a part of a shared ownership. So what happens is a resident would rent part of the property and have a mortgage or a loan on the remainder. So you can staircase from basically 10% that you own, i.e. through a mortgage, right up to full 100% ownership over time. And the council has got a policy, and that policy, I believe, comes through Homes England as well. So it's national guidance that you start at 10% and you can staircase up, I think it's either 1 or 5% at a time. So it's something that people can use to gradually get onto the home ownership market. So it allows an easier transition, let's say, between rent and home ownership. Thank you. Paragraph 5.1. So a policy compliance scheme. So apologies, councillor, if that my wording is not clear here. A policy compliance scheme would be the policy for the requirement of affordable housing. So at the moment, a policy compliance scheme based on the current local plan is 50% affordable housing. So if a policy compliance scheme came in, say, for 30 houses, then 15 would be affordable housing and the other 15 would be put on the open market for sale. So that would be policy compliant. However, I should flag up that the draft regulation 19 local plan, which has just been out for consultation, the percentage there for affordable housing is 40%. So sorry, I can't do the maths off the top of my head, but it's more houses would be on the open market. So that would be a local plan policy compliant provision. So it would very much depend on timing when that request comes in as to what the relevant local plan policy is at that point.
Sorry, Tracy, can I just clarify there though that so this scheme is currently well over what our policies would want, but if it was to be reduced, if we didn't get the Homes England grant and the applicant wanted to come back and reduce it to something that was still presumably compliant, they will have to come back to this committee to ask to do that. Is that right?
The committee can instruct me to that regard. So the normal delegated procedures would apply. But if the committee felt that that was a balancing factor that outweighed some of the harms, then the committee can request that any revised application that comes in is referred back to the committee if it's a determining issue for the councillor's decision.
Okay. Thank you for that. Right, sorry, on to Councillor Fowler's third question. Thames Valley Police.
It was the section 10.30, and it was whether all the comments from Thames Valley Police have been addressed. The simple answer to that is no. What you will see is the applicants have gone a long way to addressing some of their concerns, including agreeing things like the design of the cycle stores will be to secure by design standards. However, some of the outstanding issues relate to the location of the multi-use games area. So you can see on this slide here that this is the proposed multi-use games area. Now, the current multi-use games area is about in that location here. So the new position brings it a lot closer to both proposed and existing new homes. So the police's concern relates to the potential disturbance and antisocial behaviour arising from such an area. You will see that the report goes into a fair amount of detail of how we've considered that. But at the end of the day, there will be a degree of disturbance. So that point in their objection cannot be overcome because it is an extremely tight site. Now, the option to overcome that objection would be to remove the mugger completely from the scheme. Now, there is clearly a local desire to retain as many recreational facilities as possible. The police objected to the mugger being on site B, as the residents clearly set out, because that is isolated and away from homes not overlooked, etc. But of course, the compromise is now that you've got a mugger in very close proximity. Now, set out at the end of the report, there are a number of planning conditions that look to try and address some of the issues in relation to noise, including actually securing the facilities at the end of the day, trying to reduce the noise by looking at the type of netting proposed. As we all know, balls kicked against netting cause noise, but you can actually reduce some of that noise by having the appropriate type of netting. Please don't ask me what that is, but I'm advised that that's... So it is a very difficult one that we're trying to address and have been, and the applicants have been doing this, the comments of Thames Valley Police, but it's an area where not everything is resolved. And it's an area where harms can arise. And as I set out at the end of the report, this one is a balancing exercise where the harms are balanced against the overall benefits of the scheme. Sorry, Chair, that was probably a very long answer to that one.
Thank you. I think there's one. Oh, sorry.
Just to follow up on that, there is one more question which will come back to Tracy, but just to advise the council, the member, there is a whole section on crime and safety in the report which takes you through individually a number of the points that TVP have made and sets out where they've addressed those issues and where they haven't. So it's quite a full section in the report.
Thanks. And the last question?
Yeah, the last question was on air source heat pumps and whether they can also be used for cooling as well as heating. The technology is there to do that, as Councillor has quite rightly pointed out. We do not have details at the moment of, or the technical specifications for the air source heat pumps. There is a proposed condition for the air source heat pumps. So it would be down to the applicants to put forward a scheme. Thank you,
I guess,
Chair.
could we modify the condition to request that they do, I can't remember the wording of the condition right off the top of my head at the moment, but to request that they are the kind of air source heat pump that can be run in reverse to do cooling? That would make sense.
Let me just check that condition, Chair, and I will come back to you on that point.
Thank you.
Chair, I would just say, well, Chair, I mean, there does come a point where, you know, we can't design absolutely every element of this scheme in minutiae. So I would suggest it's not necessarily reasonable to put that in a condition. We would need to understand what the kind of impacts of that would all be. But my general feeling is that that would be a step too far. We can't, like I say, go down and design every element and minutiae of the scheme.
Fair enough. We could make it an informative maybe instead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. If we're happy with that. Okay, Councillor Clarkson next.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. The first is in relation to paragraph 1021, and that's concern that was raised by, I think, Oxford Civic Society about sewage capacity. And I just wanted to check whether the new plans for additional capacity at Sandford-on-Thames actually deal with this. And my second question is, obviously there have been some amendments to parking and the 3 original places plus disabled parking space have been deleted. You said there was only 1 car club space, fine, but I just want to know, is there no provision at all for disabled parking in this development? 1049.
Thank you. We have had no objections from Thames Water in relation to sewage capacity on this site. So I can only assume by the lack of objection that this is not an issue in respect of this scale of development. There is no disabled parking on this site. There is just 1 car club space.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Henwood was next on the list.
Thank you, Chair. So I want to go back to Homes England grant. So my understanding is, should the grant not be 100% available to us, that the housing allocation would change, and that would be subject to a new application, would it not? But should the application be approved this evening for what we see before us, then the principle of design of granting an application will be in place, would it not? It would just be to review an amended plan, would it not, if we were to come back to planning?
I'll check with officers, but my understanding was that it would be open to us to refuse it if it came back with less than 100% affordable housing. Is that correct?
That's quite right, Chair, because as you'll see from the end of the report, this is very much a balanced report where the benefits and disbenefits are compared to each other. Now, the committee may decide actually that you may wish to give further weight or less weight to some of those issues than others. And that's a decision for the committee. So the section I'm referring to within the report, just so members are clear, is when we come to the planning balance, which is on page 78, you will see that the officers have set out the weight that we've given to each of those issues. Now, under 12.9, under the social benefits, officers have given the provision of 100% affordable housing is given very substantial weight. However, members may feel if a new application comes in to change that percentage away from 100%, that actually the balance may tip the other way, or it may be acceptable. And it's a question for members as the decision makers to actually weigh the different factors. And so, to be fair, the applicants have been very straightforward and set out, as we've put in that paragraph 5.1, their position in respect of Homes England funding. So in some ways we've got a heads up, or the committee have got a heads up. So not for consideration today, anything but an 100% affordable scheme. But there is a potential that that may come forward in the future. And you may wish to ask the applicant what the certainty of Homes England funding is.
Yeah, just to clarify to the original question, is if in the event that they decide that they need to change the mix of homes, it will come back to committee. You'll be provided with a report which will set out where we think the balancing test lies. What you do need to remember is 50% affordable housing, or 40%, depending on where the current local plan, the emerging local plan is, would be policy compliant. How we balance out those matters with regards to some of the other competing issues will be set out in the report for members. It's not a discussion for now.
Yeah, I agree.
It would be a discussion for then, and you couldn't take a decision on that basis.
What I am trying to drive to is that we could set a condition today, should the Homes England grant not come through, that we could bring it back to committee to review it.
No, you couldn't. You couldn't put a condition on to that effect. Ultimately, we're saying it would come back anyway if there was such a change.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
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 My mic's playing up.
Well, my mic's fine. I've got one more question, if I may. So coming back to the question of value, whether the recreational space delivers the same amount of recreational value or greater, are officers confident that that the current plans deliver equal or greater recreational space in the space provided?
I can give you the statistics in relation to site areas. And, you know, as you'll see from the report, there is significantly less informal mown grassland. So where you would normally have picnics or play ball games, that is not proposed for replacement. So that element has gone. There is a replacement multi-use games area, which is smaller, and an equipped children's play area, which is smaller. I cannot comment on value. I think that's something that the committee have got to reach a decision on themselves. You've heard what the applicant have said, that they're replacing aging facilities. And so, as you will see within the report itself, what I've pointed out or at the end within the social disbenefits is the reduction stroke loss in recreation space. So I can give you statistics, but the value weighing is one for the decision maker, i.e. the planning committee.
Yeah. So can I just follow up question?
Well, I'll just, if I may, just to finish off that answer before you do. It isn't about confidence. The officer's report sets out the assessment of the replacement provision. The officer's report's quite clear where it thinks the deficiencies are, but why we are at that point, what the constraints-led approach to the delivery of the replacement provision. So it's open in the report. The report sets out quite clearly where they sit in terms of that as a professional assessment. It's not necessarily about the confidence of the value because you can't quantify that, but ultimately in terms of where we have to take a balanced approach, given the need for affordable housing and given the constraints on the site, that's all quite clearly set out in the report. So you've got that judgment, and that's the judgment that we are putting to you.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Councillor Henwood.
Can I come back later with additional questions, Chair?
Of course, yes. Councillor Fry.
Thank you very much. You've answered already about response to Thames Valley Police's objections. It says on pages 20 of the report pack, 27 to 29, that the Environment Agency was not going to be objecting to the application, but it then suggested 8 conditions. I just wonder, have you in your report, have you accommodated their suggestions at all? Are they represented in your final proposals?
Thank you, councillor. Yes, the Environment Agency's suggested conditions have been incorporated within the recommendations. I would say they're not word for word. As the Save Bertie picked up, there is the need for a buffer zone, which was suggested by the Environment Agency. And with a measuring of that, then it was an officer balance as to whether the Mugger children's play area should come within that zone. So you'll see that within the conditions themselves, there is a slight change to some of the Environment Agency's conditions. And the one that I've picked up is the main change here. So if you turn to page 81, which is condition 3, the buffer zone, you will see within the middle of the first paragraph, it says, notwithstanding the submitted plans, the buffer zone shall be measured from the top of the bank, defined at the point which the bank level meets the surrounding land level, and shall be kept free from built development, footpaths, formal landscaping and earthworks. And this is the new bit that's added in, excluding the footbridge, multi-use games area and children's play area. So that is again back to this point that we've got a number of competing tensions on a very tight site to try and accommodate everything. Some of the Environment Agency's conditions have had to be changed slightly, but in broad context, yes, all their conditions have been included within the recommendation.
Councillor Corish.
Okay, thank you very much. My question is about the mix of dwelling size. My question is if this planning application comply with the Oxford Local Plan 2036, and if not, the reasons or what we can mitigate about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There is a section within the report that actually talks about housing mix. I'm just rapidly getting to it. Yes, it's paragraph 1120 onwards. So in broad terms, the proposed mix of units as set out in the table does meet the policy requirements, which is policy H4 of the adopted local plan, for both 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom and 3 bedroom units. However, the scheme does not include any 4 bedroom units. So a scheme of this size would actually be required to include a single 4 bedroom unit. Now, we've been guided by the council's housing team that actually the latest specialist housing needs study, and that's December 25. So that's a more up-to-date study than the adopted local plan, shows the greatest need for affordable housing is for 1 and 2 bedroom units. And it's understood that the mix has been designed to meet the current needs, not the needs in the adopted local plan. So we are 1 4 bedroom unit short, but officers felt that on balance, it was a positive contribution to meeting local affordable housing need.
Okay, thanks. I'll go to Councillor Barlow and then come back to Henwood and then Dave. Thank you.
Thank you. I have, I think, what are questions for those who spoke for and against. Do you want me to run them by you first? Yeah, sure. So I was curious as to kind of like, yeah, the loss of space of the playground and Mugga, and whether residents, so this is a question for the people speaking against. I'm kind of curious, what other spaces residents access? So what I'm trying to get at is, what are the other nearest Mugga sites and playground sites that might be bigger, larger? I'm curious about that. And shall I ask the other?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then the other thing that I was thinking about, so this is for the applicant, with these 31 homes, I was trying to do the calculations in terms of there's quite a few 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3, and I think it comes out at about 60 occupants. You might know, but I think that's what I'd worked it out to be. And then I was kind of thinking about this shrinking green space, if you like, recreational space, and whether the applicant had thought about what that would mean for the quality of life of people living in that slightly more congested area now. So you've got already existing residents trying to access that, and then the new residents in this shrinking recreational space. And yeah, thinking about, I think, issues of congestion there is what I'm thinking. Thanks.
Yeah, our officers might be able to answer those only about nearest spaces. So,
Chair, we
Okay,
asked the
but if-
speaker to come up.
but Caddy, would you like to come? Okay.
Sorry, can I just say, so the question being put to you is what other, I appreciate I might be repeating it, but just to make clear, what other available spaces, if you can stick to the facts of that, that would be really helpful rather than into any other details. Thank you.
Okay, what we have is there is a tiny little play area in Fox Crescent, and that's the only other play area in the area. It has a kickabout facility, but it is smaller than Bertie Park, and this one has no surveillance whatsoever. It's used by local people, but it's much, much smaller. It doesn't have the same classification as this one, which is a large local park. Okay.
Very much.
Chair, on the second question about about the number of occupants in the development, I mean, we can maybe ask the applicant to come forward, but in terms of talking about what their thought process is around the quality of life for people in the units, that isn't necessarily a planning consideration. Obviously, the report sets out what our views are in terms of the policies around having an appropriate level of accommodation, both indoor and outdoor space standards. So we can ask them, but again, I think it's kind of conjecture because they're talking about people that may move into the properties.
Yes, I think that's probably, yeah, we have space standards, green space standards for numbers of, for areas, so probably not something that it's worth the applicant speculating on.
Yeah.
Sorry. Councillor Henwood?
Well, I think residents' views are really important, and I think this is a good example of one. But Chair, what I'm struggling is with policy G5. It states that existing open space and recreational facilities should not be lost unless the site is demonstrated to be surplus to requirements, replaced by equivalent or better provision, or the benefits clearly outweigh the loss. And that's the policy that I'm trying to reconcile with, and I can't see that plot B generates greater value than the existing site. And I'm just wondering how to reconcile this. I am struggling with G5. I don't see it compliant to it at the moment. I'm not convinced.
Thank you. Actually, I'm going to add my question onto that because that was something I was interested in as well, G5. So I'm going to add my question into that, which was, because G5 is very specifically about open space, and this area is not designated as open space in our, I think in our local plan policies, it's not.
Plot A is.
It is.
Is that okay? It's plot A is.
It's a lost plot A, which is the issue.
Okay. So plot, is that right? Because I want to confirm. So plot A was designated as open space in our current local plan for 2035? Because if it's not, then it doesn't come into the. Yeah, sorry.
Chair, sorry, I'm sure Tracy's going to come in. Just to qualify on what Councillor Henwood said, the policy does give 3 different limbs to it, but it's an or and an or, not an and. So just the way it was just described, talked about those limbs as if they were ands, but they were ors. So there's 3 different types of assessment to be made. So just to clarify that. But Tracy, and Hayley, did you want to come back?
Thank you. The open space is actually shown on the policies map. So the relevant paragraph in the report is 11.22. Yes, quite right. The application site is an area of open space. And in most cases, or in some cases, those open spaces are afforded protection under G5. But in this case, the site is allocated for development under policy SP 32. So it's not identified on the policies map as being protected by policy G5. So it's not a protected area. But what I have done is actually run through within the report. So the allocation of the site for housing development has already happened. And then I've run through that whether the replacement is an equivalent or better provision, which is set out in the report, or the development is for an alternative sports recreation provision. So as I've set out in the report, this is not a like for like re-provision of what's on Bertie Park at the moment.
Thank you, Tracy. Sorry, can I just clarify then, because the reason there is a sentence in the first paragraph of 1122 which says it should be noted that the application site is not identified on the OLP policies map as an area of open space under policy G5.
That's correct.
Okay, so it is not.
No.
And that's because it's already been allocated for development with policy SP 32.
Yes.
And policy SP 32 does have the requirement to provide replacement provision. But in terms of both, the assessment of both policies doesn't have to be the same level of provision. It can be an equivalent. There can be, essentially, there can be a difference in provision in terms of re-provision. It's not provide the same amount of site for that. There can be a change to that.
Okay, I've got Councillor Davis and Councillor Rawle, then I'll come back if you want more.
I'd list the questions as well, if that's okay. So these are all for the officers. Firstly, with the 100% affordable housing, if any details are able to be provided on what's qualified as affordable housing, if that's able to be quantified at all as to what the social rent will be set at or what joint ownership prices will be, what the relationship of this staircasing was with Right to Buy, and if this is us essentially selling off our social housing in the coming years. I was concerned as well to read about issues with the flood risk evacuation plan and just has this been updated following the updated flood mapping by the Environment Agency. Also regarding the concerns of toxins and metals on both Site A and Site B, I noticed that in Site A it said that clean soil will be imported, but it didn't say the same for Site B. So I wanted clarification if clean soil will be imported for Site B. Regarding the picnic tables to the west of the Mugger, I also read that it had been placed there despite it being allocated as wetland mix for biodiversity net gain, which shouldn't be accessed regularly to prevent damage. Has this conflict been addressed at all? And then finally, if the existing bridge to Site B would be closed before the new bridge is completed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. Unfortunately, I cannot, as I have no information on the proposed social rent levels, prices, or prices for the staircasing. This is something for the applicant. So in planning terms, we can require social rent under the Section 106 legal agreement, but we cannot require the set prices or the set levels. That's down to the applicants.
But Councillor Davis, just to come in, our standard, I think I'm correct in saying, is our social housing is at 40% of market rate. And so 80% of any affordable housing has to be social housing at that 40% of market rate. And then the other 20% of the affordable housing, how much can be these shared ownership things, which I don't know what the prices are for those, but as you say, you can buy half and rent the other half, and it's a stepping stone to buying. So it's not to do with selling off our council housing, which we generally try to fight as hard as possible, the right to buy. Yeah. Carry on.
Thank you. The second question was around the evacuation plan. Now, the evacuation plan was submitted back in 2023, so it was not prepared before the latest flood mapping from the Environment Agency. However, you will see within the report at the end, there is an extensive condition about a new flood evacuation plan being submitted. And I'm just doing a rapid run through. I suspect it's before occupation. Yes, proposed condition 34 on page 95, which requires a site-specific flood evacuation, flood escape plan to be submitted. And you will see from that there's a number of areas that have got to be addressed. So this is new and in response to the latest flooding levels from the EA. Turning to question 3 about both sites, both A and B, are contaminated. And extensive work has been done by the applicants with risk assessments. So the proposals on site B are very limited in relation to ground excavation. So they just relate to the footings for the footbridge, and there will be a circular pedestrian route, which will be above existing ground levels, 2 meters wide, and will be compacted gravel with timber edging. So why there's not the requirement to bring in clean material onto site B is because the measures or works there are extremely limited. The clean materials being brought in on site A relate to areas, in particular the open spaces and gardens, to ensure that future residents are protected. So that's where what's known as a capping layer of clean materials will be brought in, and some excavation will take place. Then the cut clean area will be placed on top of those areas where people perhaps are planting and using those areas. So hence the difference between sites A and B. In relation to the picnic tables to the west of the Mugger, this is actually addressed within the buffer zone condition, which is condition 3 on page 81. So you'll see that there are not, so a plan has got to be submitted for that buffer zone, and that will exclude any picnic tables, landscaping works within that buffer zone, which will be a wildlife ecology buffer zone.
Then there's one more, I think, about the bridge. But sorry to remind.
Would you mind reminding me?
Just if the existing bridge will remain, will that be closed before the existing bridge or the new bridge is opened?
The existing bridge is already closed, and there is a condition which requires that prior to occupation, the replacement footbridge will be open and available. So that's condition 43 on page 98. Now, if members would like to ensure that the existing bridge is closed and removed, then that condition can be amended to reflect that point.
Since I'm hearing some of this, can I just ask the residents, what is the status of the bridge at the moment? Are people using it, and are people using the space?
I saw that the bridge was closed.
Sorry, do come to the table.
When I found that the bridge was closed, I got in contact with Parks Department, and they said that they've been surveying the bridge and it's fine. They've made sure that it's safe, and they're maintaining it, and it's open at the moment, except for the bars which were installed like back in the day to stop people accessing Site B for joyriding. So it is open, but not accessible. Yeah.
Oh, but not, how do you mean not
But
accessible?
I mean, it's open, but not accessible for wheeled vehicles.
Okay.
Because it had the bars installed to stop joyriding on Site B.
Got it. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Rule? That's a rule.
Thank you. My question was also kind of following on from this conversation about policy G5 and how this sits and how the site has been allocated in the local plan. The question that I'm trying to get to is what was the intended spirit of the policy and wherein the current local plan and new local plan or are we like clearly intending, or it seems that both documents, the current local plan and the new local plan, intend to suggest that there should be a replacement of the multi-use games area no matter what, but the specific description about whether it's the exact same quality or better is slightly here or there in the different documents. But broadly, it feels like there is the same thrust within policy, within the current local plan and the new one. And so I'm asking if in the current local plan, in the paper, it says that we can consider emerging policies in the new local plan, depending on a few things: the stage of the preparation of the plan, the extent to which there are unresolved objections, and the degree of consistency between the policies. I recognise that in the current local plan, the SPS 32 allocation states that the recreation ground should be replaced and there should be a reprovision on plot B, though, that obviously is out of date compared to what we're looking at now. But if in the new plan, it's more specific and it says that the playground should be reprovided in the site, the replacement of the multi-use games area could be with an alternative type of facility or by improvements to the capacity of an existing one, provided reprovision is in the neighbourhood and meets the recreation needs of teenagers. So it seems stronger, I suppose, to the value of reprovision and improvement, but I'm wondering to what extent we can consider that and related policies that are not G5, but I think are G1 and G1 in the new policy suggests that this allocation is protected under G1A as a core space compared to what we were talking about earlier. So I just wanted to understand how these overlap and how to understand the strength of them. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. In respect of the new housing allocation in the consultation draft of the new local plan, I understand that that policy has received significant objection, which means we cannot give it weight, or we can only give it very little weight. So I wouldn't know where those objections came from. So what happens under Regulation 19 is we go out to consultation on those draft policies. And as set out in the report, if those draft policies have significant objection, which I believe the allocation of Bertie Park has received that, then it means that we cannot give significant or any weight to that draft policy, because that policy may change as the local plan goes through the local plan examination process. So it means that the draft policy is still in flux at the moment.
I think I may be, Catherine, I think, were you wondering, you really wanted to know, what, did the new policy sort of strengthen the protection of that open space or not compared to the old one? But we're being told that actually doesn't matter whether it is strengthened or not. It's been objected to by somebody and is likely to be, or may be changed. Is that
Chair.
Yes. It may not be, but it may be changed. So that means we can't give it the weight. So a policy goes through the local plan preparation process, and the fewer objections it has, then the chances are we could give it more weight. But in this case, we can't because of those objections.
Chair, can I just pick up on a couple of things though? With the there is a change in terms of the emerging policy, and I would argue the emerging policy I wouldn't necessarily say strengthens that point. I think what it does is it recognises that there are constraints to the site in terms of how you go about re-providing that provision. You know, in the emerging policy, it talks about, you know, adequate re-provision of the current recreational facilities to meet needs, talks about re-providing a playground. When it comes to the mugger, it actually recognises that could be replaced by an alternative facility on site, or by improving facilities elsewhere, which is not in the current plan. So actually what it's saying is you might not be able to re-provide the mugger. You might look at improving a facility elsewhere, which is different. So I don't think it strengthens that necessarily. I think it changes how the recreation facility will be re-provided. I think recognising that there are constraints on this site to delivering the homes. I think you talk about the other policies in the plan. The key here is there is an allocation policy on site. The allocation policy currently, as it stands, talks about re-providing recreational facilities. So quite close to what G5 says ultimately. But the key here, which is I think really well set out in the officer's report, is that there are constraints in terms of how we would deal with this. But the key factor is this site has been allocated for housing in order to meet quite a strong need for housing in the city. And a key part of, it was at the time, a key part of our 5-year housing land supply. You know, we don't have that 5-year housing land supply now. And so that's why the tilted balance is really key. So, you know, we can talk about the re-provision, and that's obviously for members to balance out, but the report sets out quite clearly how that's all assessed. So it doesn't really matter necessarily which policy it relates to. We're all talking about the same thing.
Thank you. And actually on that, could you just clarify because it's a bit of a niche, this thing we've referred to several times, the 5-year land supply. Could you just, in case not everybody here is entirely familiar with that concept, could you just rehearse what that means? Thank you.
Thank you. This is set out in the National Planning Policy Framework. So this was a response by the government to ensuring that there was a pipeline of sufficient housing land available across the country for new houses to come forward. So what the government has said is that each council has to have enough new homes, what they call in the pipeline. So that is with planning permission or coming forward that have not been built yet for the next 5 years. So as part of any local plan, we do a calculation which says X number of homes need to be provided across the city per year. And that's a sort of technical, you know, a figure. And then that is then by planning policy, the government says, well, you've got to tell everybody, so developers, landowners, whether you've got enough sites coming forward or sufficient land for the next 5 years. And that calculation is done, I think it's probably annually and published. And if you haven't got that 5-year pipeline or that 5-year housing land supply, then you have to give significant more weight to the provision of new housing within the city. So that's where it sort of, as Andy says, it tilts the balance away from some of our policies towards provision of housing. And that's what's set out by the government. So that's not a regime that we've set up. You will see it briefly touched upon within the conclusion and the planning balance. So it's actually set out that under section 12.3 in paragraph 77, so the government says if there are particular areas that you must protect, does it fall within one of those? And the answer in this case is no. And then any adverse impacts of granting planning permission significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefit, when considered as policies as a whole. And what officers have done is said that actually bullet point 1 doesn't apply. But in this case, the assessment says that there are no other factors which significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. And it's that last half a dozen words in paragraph 12.3, which is key to the 5-year housing land supply question.
Okay, councillor Henwood.
I sense a conflict of interest, Chair. I understand what planners are saying and requesting that we consider the housing provision in Oxford, but I'm here this evening to look at one specific plan and to judge it on its merits. I'm not going to consider the wider context of Oxford. I don't think that's relevant to this application.
Are we moving into debate at this point, or is it a question?
It's just that I do feel that the steer from officers is becoming quite pronounced in the housing need and not necessarily the application in question.
Okay.
I just answer one point. I would take exception to that comment. And I feel like I put it on record that I take exception to that comment. You've been provided with a report which sets out the assessment of the decision-making process for this application. You're not being steered in one way. The report sets out quite a balanced approach. And the conclusion includes that balanced assessment against the policies in the development plan as a whole. So I would just say it's unfair to suggest that officers here in the report and answering questions are steering you in a particular way. We're setting out the decision-making framework for the committee. So I apologize for taking that tone, but I just think it's something we need to make clear.
Okay, councillor Davis.
Yeah, I just had some follow-up questions for the officer. So regarding the new flood evacuation plan, could this potentially then lead to large-scale alterations to the site due to possible constraints from the flood mapping? Is there any risk of Site B regarding the metals to be found unsafe due to the presence if all the safety checks haven't been fully completed yet? And could the flood buffer zone potentially see the removal of the picnic tables?
Okay.
The flood evacuation plan, we haven't seen it yet from the applicants because the condition requires the submission of a new document. At the moment, I'm not anticipating that it will change the physical form of the development, but it may change how the development is managed, and that would be a matter for the applicants to put forward a proposal based on that flood risk and their potential residents. So you'll see that the condition requires the regular review of the flood evacuation plan to make sure that it is a live document to reflect changing circumstances. But the short answer is no, I don't anticipate that the physical form of the development will change. In relation to the risks and the potential pathways for contamination, you will see that there are actually a number of conditions that have been put together by the council's land quality officer and the Environment Agency to ensure that as the development goes through its construction phase, the risks again to that pathway for contaminants are regularly reviewed and updated. So for example, on page 83, condition 7 is an updated remediation strategy. Things like decommissioning of investigative boreholes that have already taken place. So there are a number of conditions, and this is the issue of land quality has been looked at in a significant amount of detail. However, as you rightly point out, that it is not always possible to, second guess what's in every part of the site, even though boreholes have taken place. And there is a condition, you'll spot 21 talks about unexpected contamination and ensuring a watching brief occurs during the development itself. So officers have looked at this in a lot of detail. And it means that we have got as much confidence as we possibly can that the measures will not result in any harm. In relation to the picnic benches, then yes, it is likely that the buffer zone will involve the removal of those benches. However, you will see that there are benches proposed within both the children's play area and on the eastern side of the multi-use games area.
Just if I could follow up. So is there a risk that Site B could potentially be unusable for residents?
I'm not aware of that. Certainly the councils, I've had long discussions with the council's land quality officer, and he has guided me as to the exact requirements for Site B. And there's been, as you can see from the length of time the application's been in, part of that time has resulted in these discussions on land contamination and land quality and minimising the risk.
Okay, well, Councillor Ball has one, then I've got a couple of small ones, and then I think we'll move into debate. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to ask the officers, like, to what extent we can give weight to policy SP 32, where it seems to be inherently flawed because it says the mugger needs to be repurposed, reprovided on plot B, and that's not an option. And so, us as members, I think a lot of us will be looking at G5 and looking at SP 32 and trying to balance these things. But I don't quite understand how much weight we can give to this when it's flawed. Maybe that's a decision we have to take and you can't advise on it, but it reads as flawed. Yeah.
Oh, can I go, Tracy? Just to say the policy isn't flawed. I think what you've got to recognise is that when the local plan is drafted, there's never as much technical information as there is with the planning application. So to be quite honest, when the site was allocated and the exact wording was proposed, clearly, they didn't know at that stage what we now know through the planning application process, which is all of the technical detail. So it's not that it's flawed, it's just that we've had to balance all of the technical responses that we've had, which have meant that the mugger can't go on Site B, so we've provided it on Site A. And I think, Tracy has very eloquently gone through all of those issues. But yeah, I think it's wrong to say that the policy is flawed. It's just they don't have the same level of information that we do now.
I was actually going to echo what Hayley said, that if you think about a cascade approach, then a site allocation is there, and as you get more and more details, your detailed approach is then the planning application that sits underneath. So as you go through this process, you get each time a greater level of detail, and it's not unusual for applications to have moved on and that actually schemes don't 100% fit what the policy allocation is. And it's a matter for the decision maker. So it is, back to that tilted balance we keep coming back to about the weight you're going to put to all aspects of this development.
Thank you. Okay, I have a couple of small ones. In 4.1, you've said the proposal is liable for SIL of 420,000. I thought affordable housing is not liable for SIL. So just checking, why is it liable for SIL?
one of the exemptions is, you're quite right, Chair, is for affordable housing. However, our seal officers don't apply those exemptions until just before the works commence on site. So as you can imagine, legislation changes over time. And the government have been proposing over the last, I think it's 2 or 3 years now, a review of the seal legislation. So the council seal officer has given us a very, she hasn't applied any reliefs, exemptions or reductions. So she's just looked at it. 31 homes would equate to this level of seal provision. Then when the development commences, which is when the seal kicks in, then it's down to the applicants to put in that exemption at that point, depending on the legislation applicable then.
Thank you. And then a question for the applicant. The Thames Valley Police are obviously very nervous about antisocial behaviour and things happening on the Mugger. It's obviously in looks like it's in a good position because what we want is natural surveillance of play areas. There was something in the report about landscaping might interfere with the natural surveillance of the Mugger. So could you just clarify for me whether that the Mugger, where it is there, which it looks like there's plenty of, it's going to have plenty of overlooking from the houses, but are you planning to sort of plant bushes along the side? I think I'm not sure those green things I think are trees, but anyway, are you planning for there to be lots of good surveillance of the Mugger?
Come to the desk.
Do come to the desk. Because I can see that, that could be an issue. I'm pleased that they've dealt with issues about noise by having the right netting and things, but if that does go in there, I would not want it to be a problem.
Okay. While you're getting set up, can I just remind you just to keep your response to the facts in terms of the question that being asked about, is there natural surveillance of the Mugger and what's being proposed?
There will be natural surveillance to the Mugger in terms of some landscaping, and there'll be some shrubs and such like. So, it was recognised by Thames Valley Police as a concern. We take that on board and we will adhere to incorporate those proposals within the scheme.
And just to add to that, the trees that are being proposed around the Mugger are small urban trees that won't, significantly disrupt views onto the Mugger. There are several conditions that have been suggested by Thames Valley Police and are on the application around secured by design accreditation. So further detailed design work will be happening on the Mugger and that area to ensure we can meet these conditions and mitigate the risk of crime.
Oh, okay. One last quick question. That's the Fairweather.
Just a quick clarification of condition 34, the flood evacuation, flood escape plan. Who's actually responsible for carrying that out? Is it the city council or the applicant?
The applicant.
Right. Thank you for all those questions, everybody. Now some comments and thoughts. Councillor Altaf Khan.
What a long discussion, and I know it's quite a difficult application. On face of it, it looks overdeveloped or crowded place, but there are two things here. We're trying to balance the housing need and the loss of the play area or the recreation ground here. I know there was a question asked about and it was answered. There's a small place in Fox Crescent, but I think the Hinksey Park is now far from Abingdon Road, now far from the place. But I heard a lot of comments for and against on both sides, but I am not sure there was a concrete any proposal for refusal or the ground for refusal. There were a lot of objections, and obviously officers try to answer all those were asked, but there is not much of substance here, which I am convinced that is going to be, if is refused, then we will hold at the appeal. So it is a very straightforward process of each application. We do hear for and against, and we like to see some sort of proposals to approve or refuse. And if it's refused, why refuse? Because the officer would like to know the reasons. Obviously, they had to fight on those reasons if the councillors are minded to refuse. So I do not see any of those. There is a lot of discussion. And at the end, I believe we have to decide on the balance of probability, whether we want to say a recreation ground or we want to go ahead with the needs of the housing. So on the balance of probabilities, I do think it's a difficult application. That's why it is a delegated application with officers. They have done their best work to present tonight and answer all the questions, but there's a lot of work ahead of that as well. They had to go through all the conditions, monitors every stage and step, because it is not a simple application to just approve it and leave it. And as it is application of the City Council Housing Company, and then the officers had, I think, quite a difficult and hard job on their hands. As they done tonight, they need to continue monitor and implement in a scheme in a way that it overcomes a lot of issues being raised. So on balance of probability, I would say that I very reluctantly, I am minded if anybody wants to go ahead with the officer's recommendation to support it, because as I see, there's not much of substance for refusal here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? And so Councillor Henwood.
Thank you, Chair. So reading the policy, the policy bit that bothers me, that I feel that the scheme fails, is when the policy reads, replacement facilities provide recreational value equal to or greater than the existing open space being lost. So for me, looking on balance at the scheme, I don't feel that the plot on plot B provides greater value than the space that's being lost. I also have very concerns on the police statement that's come forward. Plot B looks landlocked, and I think policing that, making the public safe within that area, is a concern I share with the police. So for those reasons, Chair, I will be voting against this proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I wanted to first add that I disagree with many of the TVP assessments of the site. I think many of them are deeply cynical, and I think many of them would steer us towards a more isolated, disconnected, hyper-surveilled society, particularly around the design of the housing. I think it's also disappointing that space is denied further to young people out of hours in the proposed plan. I think many of the parts of the development are wonderful. I mean, they're affordable, car-free, and but it's really disappointing that time and time again, brownfield sites aren't prioritised for developments like this and are instead given to employment spaces. I think the need for the park for the current residents is clear, and I don't think that the site offers a suitable reprovision of Bertie Place and isn't in line with SB 32 of the local plan. Neither is it in my view, in line with National Policy Frameworks 8, 98 and 99. So I'll be voting against.
Thank you. Councillor Rawle.
Yeah, thank you. Similarly to what others have said, this is a very difficult application because something that comes in at 100% affordable housing, 22 home social rent, is much more attractive than what we're used to seeing when applications come forward on housing, and the fact that it really over exceeds a number of our policies in terms of how it will meet Oxford's housing need, and that is something to be commended. But as others have also said, and as the paper highlights, like one of the things that we are here to consider is not just the housing benefit, but a number of benefits or disbenefits, and the social disbenefit seems to be quite clear here in terms of the reduction of loss of recreation space and out of line of SPS 32. The officers have noted that it's an extremely tight site, but it's clear that more strength, I think, should be given to this. My concern is that reprovision isn't adequate in terms of size, in terms of the needs of the community. The opening hours are only after dark if it's intended to be a safe space for teenagers doesn't work. And I think this has been what we see as valuable, and a loss of value is made very clear by the community that live there currently. So I will also be, for those reasons, voting against tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Clarkson.
I think I'm probably in the same sort of position as Councillor Altaf Khan. I'm finding it quite difficult to support, but I don't think there are a lot of serious grounds for refusal. One thing that I flagged up earlier, and I'm still concerned about, is the fact that you've got a development of 33 houses with no provision for disabled parking at all. That's both in contravention of our current policy M3 and the one C8 in our emerging local plan, where it says that on developments of 20 or more houses, disabled parking should be provided for at least 5% of dwellings. So that's my outstanding concern, and I don't know if anything can be done to address that. We've got an ageing population. A lot of people in our social housing are often quite vulnerable and suffer from ill health. And I think we need to think about those things quite urgently. While it's great for other people that it's car free, it's a very accessible site, I do think this is a serious omission. But other than that, and I'd really like that to be addressed, I don't see any grounds for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Fairweather.
Yes, I'd like to echo Councillor Altaf Khan's comments and Councillor Clarkson's comments. Yes, we do need affordable housing. We do need social housing. But I have concerns about the location of the mugger near the houses. I have concerns about whether the Thames Valley Police objections, whether we will come to regret actually allowing this to go ahead in terms of antisocial behaviour at some point in the dim and distant future. I'm concerned about the loss of green space, the policy G5, and like Councillor Clarkson, I'm concerned about the lack of provision of disabled parking. But on balance, I will be somewhat reluctantly supporting the officer's report. Officer's recommendation, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really hard not to acknowledge the merits of the application, like 100% affordable housing, which is why I think we've had such a lengthy discussion so far. But to add to what others have raised around losing recreational space, and it's not just a small amount, it's a significant amount. So the mugger is not quite a mugger. When I read the supplementary materials that were provided, I think it won't be able to facilitate a five-a-side match, for instance. So it seems significantly reduced. But then to add to that, and this was in the report as well, around the detriment to the people. So the incoming residents, potential residents, and the existing residents, the noise issue did seem to be quite significant. So the mugger being, I think it was, like, if I've got this right, about some of the houses, 8 meters from the mugger. And it's advised that it should be like 30 plus or something like that. And whilst in the report, it talks about the fact that the applicant can use materials to lessen the noise at the mugger and use materials in the residents, in the new properties as well, some of the new properties, to lessen the noise. It's not quite enough, and that's what was coming across in the report to me. And again, looking at G5, I don't think we can argue that Bertie Park is a surplus to requirements. It's quite clear that residents want to develop that valuable and precious local green space for themselves. And yeah, and the development doesn't, unfortunately, I don't think it replaces or improves. So I'd also be minded, sadly, indeed, to vote against. But very happy to hear that there's 250 homes being built nearby, which I was not aware of. So, yeah.
Just to clarify, 250 homes aren't being built nearby. That's an allocated site. It hasn't come forward as an application yet. So just.
Anybody else? And I'm Councillor Fry.
I would like to propose that we approve the application with all the conditions attached and proceed to a vote.
Okay, I think
And to delegate
seconding.
Delegate
to officers with all the conditions.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say that this, it is a really difficult balance, isn't it? We'd obviously like everyone to have a home somewhere in the city they wanted to live in and for it to be near some green space. But this site is what it comes down to. Basically, this is an allocated site. We have allocated it. It's gone through in our last local plan that we will have 30+ homes on it. The idea was that we could re-provide all of the space using Site B. I actually think, having grown up in the countryside, I love having wild space to go around that's not actually a mugger or a playground. I think having a nature trail around Site B could be actually rather nice, especially as as climate change happens and the world gets hotter. Being out on the mugger or out on an open playground is going to be perhaps less attractive at some times of the year than walking around Site B. Again, it is a shame that we can't do exactly what was planned in that first SP 32 policy, but the applicant has tried really hard to re-provide everything that they could in that very tight space. So I will be supporting it. So on that note,
before councillors move to the vote, can I just clarify under Councillor Fry's proposal whether that includes. So at the start of the meeting, I said that the applicants would like the staircased shared ownership to start at 10% and move to 100%. The amendment to condition 17, which is to remove the reference to statutory. And then an informative about the air source heat pumps, including cooling. And also to secure the removal of the existing footbridge under condition 43.
Yes, and I think I would also like to add that we would like to, because I think that the fact that it's 100% social housing is quite important to a lot of us, that if that Homes England grant doesn't come through and it stops being 100% affordable, we would like to instruct you to make sure that it comes back to committee for us to decide again whether we want to approve or not.
Can I add that as an informative?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We'll add that as an informative.
Chair, can I just clarify then? Sorry, I wasn't sure if it was Councillor Altaf Khan that who commented first proposed to support and whether Councillor Fry is seconding that. And
I did hear it first from Councillor Altaf Khan that to propose, so Councillor Fry.
There's a fine either way. Say a proposal and second.
Perhaps Councillor Fry to second. Yeah.
But I think on one of this condition or the for informative, I did hear if there are any significant change to the application that should come back to the committee.
Okay, so with those 5 things listed by Tracy then, can I see all those in favour of approving this application? Support, thank you. And can I see all of those against? And any abstentions? No, there's no abstentions. Okay, thank you. So that application is passed. Thank you to everyone who came along for that item. It is really valuable for us to hear from all sides. Thank you. Right. Item 5. Is everybody right? Anyone need a quick comfort break?
I was just about to request a comfort break, if that's okay,
Please.
even if
Yeah,
it's just
yes.
5 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
Thank
no,
you so
it's
much.
hot and it's been 2 hours, so we should all move around a little bit. Right, folks, back to item number 5, which is plots 23 to 26 at Oxford Science Park, which stalwarts of the committee will have seen before. But we're over to Jennifer to explain to us what's changing now.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So just before I begin my presentation, I have a couple of verbal updates for you. With regards to SIL, we've now sort of taken into account the quantum of built development that's already on site. That's already been captured by SIL. The remaining SIL payment that is liable for this scheme has been recalculated at £315,515.42, which is a huge reduction from the amount that's set out in my committee report. But, you know, it's a lot of it has already been paid by the previous applicants because the development has already commenced on site. With regards to ecology, the original recommendations set out within the committee report requested that committee delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Regulation to negotiate and finalise the mechanism to secure BNG, biodiversity net gain, with the applicant team. But since the publication of the report, officers have received an amended BNG metric and assessment, which confirms that 10% BNG would be achieved through a combination of on-site enhancements, including the introduction of other neutral grassland, modified grassland, sustainable drainage systems, and new shrub and urban tree planting. The remaining units would be purchased from the Trust of Oxfordshire's Environment, who would use the Lokemead Habitat Bank near Tame, part of which is in the same national character area as the application site. The applicant has provided sufficient information to give officers confidence that the deemed BNG condition under Schedule 7A of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 would be discharged through a biodiversity gain plan agreed with the local planning authority following the grant of planning permission. A habitats monitoring and management plan would secure the implementation of BNG enhancements and a 30-year monitoring plan. So that would all be secured by condition. So a number of members will probably remember that full planning permission was granted in October 2023 for 3 4-storey buildings to serve as offices and containment level 2 laboratories for life science research and development. Development commenced on site but was stalled following EIT's acquisition of the site. This proposal has come forward as a new full application for the partial demolition and alterations to the existing partially constructed buildings on site and the erection of 2 atriums that would connect the 3 separate buildings on site. This current scheme has been designed in close partnership with the Generative Biology Institute and the Plant Biology Institute, who would be the end users, to ensure that the spaces created would reflect their new function, enable collaboration, and are fit for purpose. There would be a reduction in gross internal area from 65,539 square metres as consented, down to 62,218 square metres. So these are the site photos you can see here. Sorry, my cursor's a bit delayed. This is the building 1 that's under construction at the moment. The white block of Portakabins is the site office. And this is taken from Heatley Road at the back of the Schrödinger building, showing all the buildings under construction. And here just shows the buildings in relation to Fletcher House, which is this building here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Yeah. So these floor plans illustrate the various alterations proposed and the areas shaded in green indicating the existing slab and columns to be retained. The red denoting demolition and blue are the areas of new construction. And these floor plans clearly demonstrate that the majority of the buildings and their structure would be retained. So this is, I'll just quickly whiz through the floor plans. So ground first, second, third, and fourth. Oh, and the roof plan. The proposed new atriums would connect the buildings in order to improve efficiency and collaboration. A number of new ancillary buildings would be located along the southern boundary, details of which would be secured by condition. Access would be, sorry. Access would be taken from the existing science park infrastructure, remaining unchanged from the arrangements approved under the 2023 consent. The construction access road would be replanted following the construction phase, and this road here is the construction access. So the ground floor plan, where the atriums would provide main entrances, accommodate meeting rooms, seminar space, cafe, shared workspaces, and a 250-seat auditorium. And a typical floor plan of buildings 1, 2, and 3 would accommodate wet labs at contamination containment level 2, write-up spaces, and ancillary uses. The maximum height of the buildings from Undercroft to the top of the chimneys would measure 27.8 metres, compared to the consented scheme that measures 27 metres. The height of the roof line to the mechanical plant enclosure would be 25.3 metres, a reduction in height when compared to the consented scheme, which measured 26 metres. During the pre-application process, the applicant team responded to officer comments by articulating the built form, by introducing a variation in height and roof form to reduce perceived bulk, improve visual interest, and better respond to the differing functional needs of the north and south elevations. The atrium massing has been refined to introduce a clearer profile and greater vertical emphasis. The approved glazed facade would be amended to incorporate concrete, Cotswold stone, and metal to reflect the architectural language of Littlemore House and Littlemore Brook, the other EIT-owned laboratory buildings on the science park. During the pre-application process, the greenhouse element was amended to create a more distinctive, I'll just point out the greenhouse element there, a more distinctive element of the proposal in order to celebrate what a special and unique element the greenhouse is at the top of the building, which is to be occupied by the Plant Biology Institute. It's now clear how the science and environmental requirements of the space are driving the architectural form following these amendments. And these are the end elevations. This is the visual. Officers consider that the applicants have successfully articulated the roof line whilst achieving a coherent and visually resolved roofscape, and have broken up the massing to mitigate the increased scale and mass and improve the quality of architecture and legibility with the distinct atrium design. Whilst the additional height of the atriums adds to the overall mass of the proposal, the forms are slender, well detailed with thin aluminium profiles, and add to the overall legibility of the scheme from within the science park, directing visitors naturally to one of the two main entrances. And that's just another visual there. As set out within the committee report, the continuous line of trees to be planted along the southern boundary fronting the A4074, as previously approved, can no longer be implemented. This is due to a Thames water pipe being installed closer to one of the recently constructed buildings than anticipated. However, it's still considered that the proposal would not be unduly overbearing on neighbours in Sanford with this gap in the trees. And these are the verified views from the TVIA. The top montage is the existing from Heatley Road with the consented buildings above, and the proposed montage sits below. As mentioned a moment ago, the articulation of the proposal and high quality materials palette is considered to mitigate the impact of the increased mass. The view of the scheme from Rock Farm Lane and Keene Close remains key due to its proximity to the site and its character as a distinct settlement in this rural edge landscape. When compared to the consented scheme, this view is actually considered to be improved with a softer curved roof profile. The visibility of the proposal from the A4074 views, signposting and celebrating the science park is considered appropriate in this context. So just a couple of technical points. In terms of ecology, there'd be no harm to any identified protected species, And as set out within the verbal updates, officers are satisfied that a 10% BNG can be achieved on and off-site. The development would result in a marginal net gain in tree canopy cover through new and retained soft landscaping. In terms of sustainability, the development would be of sustainable design and construction, achieving a 40.25% reduction in carbon emissions when set against the 2021 Part L building regulations. During the pre-application process, concerns were raised regarding embodied carbon, given that the proposal involves the partial demolition of recently constructed buildings and with the emerging relevant policies in mind. The applicants have, however, demonstrated a strong commitment to circular economy principles by prioritising the retention of existing structural frame, the reuse of building elements, including the mechanical plant, on and off-site, minimising construction waste and selecting recycled and responsibly sourced materials. The proposal would provide improved transport infrastructure through financial contributions, and it's considered that there would be no harm to the highway network as a result of the reduced traffic generation when compared to the previously consented scheme. The proposal would provide 332 car parking spaces, a substantial reduction compared to the previously proposed 861, which equates to a mode share of 34%. Adequate cycle parking would be provided across the site, with further details to be secured by condition. As set out in more detail within the committee report, there'd be no adverse flood risk and drainage impact, nor would there be any adverse land contamination, noise pollution or air quality impact. The development would accord with all policies in the Oxford Local Plan 2036 and the NPPF. Planning Committee are therefore recommended to approve the application subject to the required planning conditions and satisfactory completion of the Section 106 legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Okay, we don't have any speakers against, and we have a couple, apparently 4. We've got Guy Wakefield and Matt Abney, if you'd like to come up to the table. And you have up to 5 minutes between you. Do you want me to let you know when you're halfway through, or will you?
A minute left would be great. Thank you, Chair.
There's a minute left. We'll do. Okay.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. As I hope you're all aware, the Ellison Institute brings together world-class scientists, technologists, and innovators collaborating across disciplines to make unprecedented impact in visionary science. This collaborative approach is embedded in everything we do, including the design of our campus. When we were last here in 2023, we addressed this committee. We were seeking to create a home for our employees at Littlemore House and Littlemore Brook facilities. Since then, we've been fortunate enough to be able to expand our ambitions to deliver cross-disciplinary visionary science, which requires additional space to deliver. We identified the existing Daubney site at the Science Park as the ideal location to accommodate the number of researchers supporting our generative biology and plant biology institutes. However, the existing scheme provided for 3 separate buildings, which restricts the ability for much needed collaboration between those teams. To address this issue, it was determined that the atriums between the buildings is a required intervention for the site for us. With these adaptations proposed, we'll have the opportunity to provide state-of-the-art research facilities with spaces for automation and early stage commercial development, as well as supporting the growth of the EIT Oxford campus, encouraging collaboration across our teams. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Just a few points from me. So first of all, it's worth noting that your officers and the applicant have worked closely together to agree a position where officers can actually recommend approval for the application. That process has involved a number of concessions and changes made both during pre-application and determination of the application as well, so as to respond to some of the comments that have been made by interested parties. As the officer has set out, the principle of development is acceptable, the site's allocated for employment purposes, involves previously developed land, and the bulk of the existing structure on site is being retained. In addition, there are no objections from any of the statutory technical consultees. Lord Foster and his studio, Foster and Partners, have designed the proposed scheme, as they did with Littlemore House and Littlemore Brook, with what we believe to be improvements in the overall appearance of the building through the use of an improved palette of materials and greater visual interest achieved by, for example, the introduction of the greenhouse, and the articulation between the fenestration and the concrete elevations. The most significant change, as highlighted, is the introduction of the 2 atriums linking the 3 approved buildings. Careful consideration has been given to their design and connection to the main existing structures. Rather than just a flat facade, the atriums are stepped slightly back, as well as the glass of the actual atriums being recessed from the frame of the structure. Whilst the atriums are slightly higher than the rest of the building to break up the massing, as the case officer has clarified, there is no significant increase in the height of the building compared to the extant scheme. I won't go through all of the application's benefits, but a couple of the key ones. First, the scheme is expected to support approximately 1,900 annual full-time equivalent roles in the construction phase, rising to over 3,500 annual full-time equivalent roles once the building is fully operational. Another benefit is the actual operations to take place within the buildings and what will hopefully be achieved within them. Take the Plant Biology Institute, for example. It is striving to improve global food production and planetary health through pioneering plant science research. The amount of food we need to produce globally between now and 2050 is greater than all of the food produced in the last 5,000 years combined. EIT therefore develop crop varieties and decarbonise plant cell-based production systems.
1 minute to go.
Thank you, Chair. That produce more food with less land under worsening climate change conditions. Given the scheme's overall benefits and its compliance with the local plan, we hope that you will support the officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for keeping to time. Right, anybody got any questions about this? Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I had a question for the officers regarding the number of jobs that are accredited to the development. So, given that this is a change from the original plan, I wanted to ask how it's still accredited with increasing jobs, given that at least the county council were told that there was a decrease in jobs from the original plan. It also claims in 10.5 that it will deliver, I think, 3,696 FTE jobs, but that is different to what the county council were told, which says there will be a job provision of 1,215, which is repeated in 10.32. Surely that means one of these numbers is incorrect, essentially, and I wanted to check why that was.
Thank you.
So the previous scheme was speculative. There was no end user. There was no end user on board. This is a more specific number, a known quantity of employees on site. With it being labs rather than officers, there is a lower proportion of employees on site at any one time. The previous scheme was labs, but it was, as I say, it wasn't as accurate as this is now. The number of jobs, where are you saying that it's 925 direct jobs? Is that what you're talking about during construction?
It says in 10.5 that there will be 3,696 FTE jobs, but then in 10.32 it says of 1,215, and that was also reported to county council when they had issues with the bike parking.
So that's during the 5-year construction period, 1,932. I'm just checking here during construction. I'm not sure, to be honest, where that discrepancies come from. Perhaps the applicants know. And then during operation, it'd be 1,215.
Yeah, 1,200. It says in 10.5 that it would deliver in the 25-year operational period 3,639 on the
over the 25-year. Yeah, so at any one time, there would be 1,215 jobs created during operation, but over the lifetime of the period, of the operational period, it's considered that there would be 3,639. Does that answer your question? Yeah, over the lifetime of the period, of the operational period.
Councillor Clarkson.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the fact that part of the tree belt was going to be missing because of the way that a Thames water pipe had been placed. And I just wanted to be clear about whether any of that can be compensated for on the site, or as Jennifer mentioned earlier about in terms of biodiversity net gain, putting them elsewhere.
We'll start with officers or, yeah.
Yes, so it is unfortunate that we're losing that portion of the tree belt, and it was unforeseen, and it's sort of out of the hands of the applicant. Within this current red edge, there is no possibility to re-provide those trees, given that they're already replanting the construction road, and all of the space is being used up basically to enhance the landscape as far as possible. So it's my understanding that the short answer is no, it can't be re-provided elsewhere on site at this current time.
Do the applicants want to add anything to that?
Agree with what Jennifer said, really. We are squeezing particularly that boundary as hard as we can to try and compensate for the loss of the trees that were approved under the previous application. It is an unfortunate consequence that when we took control of the site, we weren't first made aware of that water main. It happened and its construction took place before the control by the Ellison Institute, but we are squeezing it as hard as we can. I just don't think there's any scope for any greater tree planting than what's proposed. And indeed, it would have affected the previous application as well in the same way that it's affected us.
Thanks again, Councillor Barlow.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a couple of questions about the employability aspect as well. So these buildings are purpose for a 25-year duration. And the first question is, I was wondering, I don't know if you can speak to this, but like the proportionality of like jobs for local people in those facilities. And I suppose I was kind of like also thinking about like after this operational period, like what, if any, vision there is, because it's being built with a specific mind and purpose in mind. It's hot. But there's the life science thing. So yeah, it's this 25-year thing that I think I was wandering around.
Okay, so in terms of jobs for local people, the applicants have agreed to enter into a construction employment and procurement plan, which would ensure that during the operational period, 20% of employees would be from an Oxfordshire postcode. There was a construction element that was secured under the previous consent that was carried out and discharged under the Section 106. So that ensured that 20% of the construction workers were locals or within the Oxfordshire postcode. And this would enter into the same agreement for the operational phase. In terms of the lifetime of the buildings, obviously 25 years isn't that long, and in terms of embodied carbon, we would hope that the buildings would last much longer than 25 years. But in terms of the vision for what would happen post its use as a lab, I can't answer that. Maybe the applicants can do a better job at answering what the future vision would be. But as I'm aware, this is a long-term vision. It's just 25 years is the projection that they're able to project at the moment.
If you'd like to speculate at that, please do. I might get some advice as to whether that's a relevant planning matter for us right now.
Yeah, of course, Chair. I mean, it is pure speculation. I mean, the expectation from the Ellison Institute is the buildings will certainly last longer than 25 years, given the cost to build in particular. So that is the expectation in terms of their lifetime. But in terms of the operations, again, the actual operations to take place, as Mr. Abney set out, are, we believe, critical to the sustainability of the environment and the country and the world as a whole, really. And we can't see those operations ever ending. That is obviously one of the 4 missions that sort of drives Ellison Institute in terms of its development and so on and so forth. The expectation beyond that is to continue to grow across the science park and develop new facilities and so on and so forth. But I think I'm talking beyond what was asked, really, in that sense.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, thanks. And I think Councillor Davis had another question.
Yeah, this is for the applicants. Just in terms of employee numbers, what is the risk necessarily that the employees present at the institute could increase in the future, and who would then need more cycle parking, more parking? And just for the officers, is there any mechanisms for the developer to fund more cycle parking should the number of employees change?
I mean, we can't discuss hypothetical situations. We're discussing the proposal that's in front of us today. They are proposing sufficient cycle parking for the number of staff that's anticipated on site. So that's all I can say.
Okay, Councillor Fry.
The branch line to which it's good that the project would contribute will presumably reduce the need for car numbers. And I just wondered how you factored that. Are these projected numbers of car parking spaces and so on, is that assuming the rail line is in operation, or that is before it's up and running?
We'll go to officers first.
So the Highways Authority have been consulted on this application. As I mentioned, the mode share for cars would be down to 34%, which is a huge reduction from the consented scheme. As part of the consented scheme, there was an agreement to reduce car parking numbers down to 34%, I think 34%. Once the Cowley branch line is operational, this scheme is already at that level. And taking into account the sustainability of the site and where members of staff will come from, it's considered that it is appropriate and there is no need to reduce car parking any further at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Koresh.
Okay, I have two questions. If you ask me, I'm not sure if this is a scope of this planning application, but I will ask. One is about the enforcing light mitigation. And the report states that the light pollutions to nearby Sandford residents will be mitigated using a roll shade and before 7 a.m. and after 11 p.m. My question is, will this system be fully automated to prevent human errors? And my question is because as a city council for Littlemore, I have a lot of complaints about the science park when people don't switch off the lights, and also the worst complaint I received was really the alarms ring all night and nobody know about it. This is why I make these questions. I don't know, of course, it's the scope of the planning. The second question is about the application required the partial demolition and the structural alteration of the speculative buildings that were only just approved and started in 2023. And while the applicant promised a circular economy approach by reusing material, how will the council audit this to ensure the massive embodied carbon waste of the tear down new constructions is actually offset?
Thanks, Jennifer.
So in terms of the mitigation of light pollution, we do the building has been designed with those automated blinds and shutters that we have to trust will work. I can't anticipate every eventuality where one might not work. We consider that's appropriate. Further, there is a condition requiring a lighting strategy with regards to bats. So we would have to make sure that the lighting would be dimmed and there wouldn't be any material light pollution during dark, so that those bats are not affected. And it would serve two purposes. If it's good enough for the bats, it's good enough for the neighbours. In terms of the partial demolition, we did discuss this a lot at pre-app. And I knew it's very topical, the embodied carbon. We don't currently have a policy relating to embodied carbon, and it carries very little weight because there's been a lot of objection, and it is a departure from our existing strategy in the adopted local plan. The energy strategy that's been submitted with the application would be adhered to, and that would be secured by condition, a compliance condition. But in terms of calculating the embodied carbon, we don't have a process for doing that currently under this local plan. We're behind the curve in terms of embodied carbon, as all local plans would be. So we have to take it in good faith. And we did really test the applicants about this. They've gone into a lot of detail about exactly where materials could be recycled. They'd be giving them away, they'd be selling them, reusing them. A lot of them could be refunded, as I understand it, to the manufacturers because it's so recently purchased and not put into place yet. So yes, whilst it does seem alarming that such recently constructed buildings are being partially demolished, I do have faith that the applicant team have those ambitions and will stick to them.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, with the changes to the biodiversity net gain, what is the proportion of the biodiversity net gain that's going to be done on-site versus off-site?
So I'll just get that. There is a total of 11 units to be provided. Most of it would be provided off-site. Sorry, I thought I had updated that. So no, there's 11 units in total that need to be purchased. Here we go, sorry. So the applicant has confirmed 11.34 off-site units would be required. 3.5 units to be provided from the earlier 2022 application, with an additional 7.84 units purchased for off-site to be allocated to the Trust of Oxfordshire Environment. So out of the 11.34, 7.84 would be off-site.
Thank you. Right, I'm hoping we're now ready to go to debate. But of course, yes, one quick one, yes, go.
Just a quick one, hopefully. I was just looking at the mode share when it comes to cars versus like how many employees. And I think it said that it was 34%. And I wondered, I was trying to remember in relation to local plan, what the guidance is around mode share for cars versus, yeah, number of people. What I'm trying to get at is, could it possibly be less than this? Yeah.
So there is no set guidance in the local plan about mode share. What we require for non-residential developments is there's no gain and possibly a decrease from what's already on site. I don't know what this site is now. It was undeveloped. So we were generally allowing 40% mode share, and it's based on the justification within the transport assessment submitted by the applicant for sites that aren't previously developed. This is now in comparison to what's been consented. There is a huge decrease in car parking. It's been demonstrated and justified in the transport assessment that this level of car parking is required. And the Highways Authority, taking into account other comparable schemes in the city, are satisfied that this percentage is acceptable because the scheme has to be operational. So it needs this level of car parking to make it work.
Thank you. Right. Okay. Any comments? Feelings? Any proposals for a vote?
I think we should go with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Are you proposing approval? I saw Councillor Clarkson next. Okay.
I was going to second it, but.
Yeah. Are you happy? Okay. Lots of seconding then. We're looking to voting in favour of this. The only change was that we don't need to delegate securing biodiversity net gain anymore because that's already been secured. But otherwise, the officer's recommendation with all the conditions. Can I see all of those in favour of that?
Unanimous.
That's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much indeed, everybody. Thank you for coming along and waiting through the earlier item. Sorry, I forgot to mention that Councillor Elphinstone left before this one started because of her declaration of potential interest she had made at the start. Right, so that was unanimously 4. So then just please note forthcoming applications. Noted. Thank you. And the dates of future meetings.